Right on. Everybody, Mr. Gene Hoglan on the drums.
Howdy, everybody. How are you? Good to be here.
Gene, welcome to Drumeo, man.
Man, Ash, it is so amazing to be here. Thank you, brother.
Yeah.
It's incredible to be a part of the Drumeo family, and it's really cool. Got the array of drummers that you guys have around here. I'm a total scrub compared to all you guys, so it's really awesome. And hell, you and I have been family forever, so.
Yeah, we've known each other for a minute. That's kind of why I'm here. With Jared and Dave's blessing, you know, they let me sit in and come and teach a lesson today, so.
Well, thank you, Jared and Dave. Awesome. Couldn't be in better hands right now.
For those of you who don't know who Gene is, he, in fact, is no scrub. Just so you know, he is an absolute living legend in the heavy metal drumming community. He's played in some of the best, most fantastically legendary bands, such as Death, Strapping a Lad, Zimmer's Hole, Dethklok, Fear Factory, Meldrum. I have a list here because I can't remember them all.
I can't either.
Yeah, he currently plays with Dark Angel, which is your first band, right?
That's right.
Right? Come back around again.
Yeah,
and,
we are back at the beginning.
Yeah, it's as good as ever. And as well as Testament, which you just heard was a Testament song. And you also play with Galaktikon.
Darn tootin'.
With Brendan Small.
That's right.
Awesome. Great. Again, my name is Ash Pearson. I play in a band called Revocation, and Gene and I are old pals. In fact, he sort of taught me how to play drums back in the day when he was living in Vancouver. So
awesome.
Yeah, so here we are. And also, we'd like to thank some of the sponsors. You know, we got Sabian cymbals, we got Pearl drums, we got ProMark sticks, we got Evans heads. Is there any that I'm missing?
Boy, we got some Danmar beater balls, but these are 35-year-old beater balls on these brand new Pearl Redline pedals. But that's about that. Roland. Thank you, Roland.
Roland.
Appreciate that very much.
Yeah.
Thank you for the triggers and stuff. And we got some Elisa's here, but they're not a sponsor. Come on, Elisa's, kick down some triggers over here.
Yeah. And we'd like to thank the 35-year-old Danmar beater balls.
Yeah, man.
Thank you. Cool. For those of you who don't know what Drumeo is or what we do here, we do this kind of thing all the time. We bring out some of the most rockin' players from all around the world to give you guys lessons. And we got from the United States, we got Gene here, but you know, we bring out people like David Garibaldi, Matt Garska, Dennis Chambers, all sorts of, you know, excellent players.
Awesome.
And we're also going to be filming some course material with Gene as well. So
that's right.
You know, go to Drumeo if you want to check that stuff out. Also, I wanted to mention Gene's online presence. He's got a Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and all that stuff, and his own website. So he's got HoglanIndustries.com. He's got Facebook, Gene Hoglan official page. Instagram is The Real Gene Hoglan, and Twitter is @Gene Hoglan. And that's that. He's also been on the cover of Modern Drummer magazine, which is no small accomplishment. And you also have your own DVDs. He's made 2 DVDs and self-released them, and they're awesome. So I recommend you check those out.
Darn tootin'. They are called The Atomic Clock and The Atomic Clock, The Clock Strikes 2. And they're both available from HoglanIndustries.com as well as Amazon, stuff like that. So definitely check them out because they're a whole lot of fun.
Today's lesson, 10 metal drumming tips from Gene Hoglan. We're going to be talking about a whole bunch of different stuff, some practical applications for the kit, but also some conceptual stuff too. So, what do we got here? I got my list. All right. So Gene, I'll let you take it away, but I'll set you up. I wanted to get more into some of your warm-ups, what you do before you start playing a show.
Well, my warm-ups have evolved over the years. I mean, there used to be the time when I used to have these big giant leg bones that I would warm up with just because they were really heavy. And these days, for my hands, you know, I've always used big, heavy weighted sticks or something. But these days, I just, you know, my tech Jeff just has thrown together, you know, 3 sticks. And this is a real decent way to just get the weight into your hands. You know, the entire concept of my whole warm-up thing is to make things obviously easier when you're on stage, but also make things lighter, and that's one way that things become easier. I don't know if you can tell, we can point down here, got the leg weights on, so, you know, I keep the leg weights on when I play a lot of the times. A lot of the times I'll play a few, well, we'll get into leg weight stuff in a little bit, but this is essentially, you know, my warm-up routine these days is I just sit, like, with Testament, I'll just sit here for 10 minutes before the show and do stuff like this, you know. Testament doesn't have a whole lot of crazy rudiments or anything like that that I have to really be on top of, but the energy is there in the song. So I just, like for instance, that last track I just played, Brotherhood of the Snake, that's been our opening number for the past few tours, and I'm sure it'll remain our opening number for a while. And that song itself is a good little warm-up. If you noticed, I didn't do a big fat warm-up before that one, and that song's in the wheelhouse to play. But, I just take some heavy, I use 2B sticks, so I just, we've taped 3 of them together, and that's essentially my hand thing. But a lot of times what I'll do, just super quick to warm up, is I'll just do, and I showed this on my first DVD, a little warm-up. All it is I just do double strokes on the hands, and I'll do single strokes on the kicks. And here's an example of it. There's an example, and then if you want to start kind of chopping things up a bit, you could start, here's an example. And one thing that little exercise does is it allows you to start, like if you notice, I'm a left foot lead when I do stuff. We can explain that at some point. But if you notice in the little diddle-diddle-dit, diddle-diddle-dit that I was doing on the kicks, that's one thing that I worked on a lot when I was younger, is that follow through. It's coming back to the one with things instead of just going diddle-it, diddle-it. It's like you want to be able to come back to the one, because you always got to come back to the one when you're playing double bass. So when you're doing any kind of rudiments to help warm yourself up, or just when you're playing your patterns anyway, fills and stuff, you always want to be able to come back out onto the one. So that's why I always try to bring that extra snap down with my left foot, probably your right foot. And yeah, so that's just a real decent, quick little warm-up. Gets you going, and it also starts creating the synchronization, I suppose, between your left and your right. And when you got that all locked in, then you're good to go.
Yeah. I learned that from you. I use that sometimes when I'm warming up. It's good for coordination warm-up,
Cool.
It's awesome. And you got the ankle weights, you got the sticks. What else? Do you mess around with energy drinks at all or anything like that before you play?
Well, I used to be a Red Buller, and these days I don't do that too often. But what I do have is there's this guy named Dr. Schultz, and he has this stuff called superfood. And there's a whole lot of superfoods out there, but I happen to be real partial to this Dr. Schultz's superfood. You go find his stuff on herbdoc.com. But his superfood just gives me a super pile of energy.
Nice.
And, that's helpful. A lot of guys, especially back in the old days, they would do drugs to get up and do drugs to get back down. And I suppose Red Bull and caffeine, hell, I used to pop caffeine pills. I'm sure those are all druggy to some point, but now I'm doing the natural, supernatural energy from all that sort of stuff. And I try to turn as many people as I can onto it. Like, for instance, I turned Paul Bostaff onto superfood right before a Slayer show. And I remember I spoke to his tech, Gene, right after the show. And I was like, hey man, how did that superfood work out for Paul? And he was like, I love it, it's great, but I can't rein in the ballads. And I just started laughing, because I'm like, first of all, which Slayer song is a ballad? What are you talking about? But anyway, so it's, I'm turning it on to a whole bunch of people, and it's just a good, quick energy thing for me anyway.
Speaking of that, another part of your warm-up that it seems counterintuitive, but I see you sleep before you play.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, so what gives you a benefit of sleeping?
That's just, you get your energy going, and I'm a huge napper, and I got my little nap time before the show, and I try to wake up about 50 minutes before the show. And there's been many times back, like the strapping days, when I was sleeping off the hangovers, for God's sake. Byron would be like knocking on my head, like, dude, we are on in 5 minutes, dude. Come on, let's get this going. And you're playing all foggy and stuff like that. So now I try to wake up a little bit ahead of time and get myself in the zone. And I don't do a lot of prep. Like, I'm not a brood in the corner kind of guy. I'm pretty gregarious and engaging when I'm warming up. So I don't need Gene needs his space or anything like that. Nothing like that. So, but there's also stretches that are fantastic. And this is one thing that super helps with the warm-up, is For years, I've done this stretch. I start off with, usually I use it with the big old heavy sticks there, with the triplet sticks or whatever. I just do a little action like that to break the left wrist, crack it anyway, and then the right wrist. That's a good way to go. That's not easy to do, you know. When I first tried it, I was like, oh God, this is terrible. And now, you know, pretty quick. And also this little stretch here that there's one. It's a series of 3. That was the first one. And then down, and like I've said before, you really feel it right here, and then you flip it over, and you do that, and you feel that right there. And I explained that one on my first DVD, check that one out. But you're good to go, like instantly. If you can't warm up and, oh God, I need 20 minutes of pad work or anything, if you don't get that 20 minutes and you do that little stretch, you're good to go in 30 seconds. So,
awesome.
Hooray.
Great. So that's most of what you do for warming up. That leads me into the ankle weights. You kind of wear those before you're playing, and you even leave them on when you play.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If the set list allows to you know, have a bunch of, I suppose, easier songs to warm up with, I'll keep them on for 6 or 7 songs, or whenever, you know, I'll keep them on until that hauling song when the double bass is really flying.
Right.
And like I've said a million times before, you just pop off the leg weights, and that is a warm-up right there. You are good to go. You're ready to fly. And if you've ever had any sort of issues with, like, man, I do need 6 or 7 songs to warm up for that hauling double bass song. Like, say if your set list starts off with the hauling double bass song, you know, if the rest of your band are a bunch of sadists on the drummer, then, you know, warm up with them a little bit, do your things. And, you know, one of my warm-ups is that Dom Famularo, you know, side-to-side sort of thing. If you're looking at the feet right now, I do that a lot. That's a fantastic warm-up. I don't know why. I've always said this is rather odd-looking, but you do this little thing with leg weights, and you get them going pretty fast, and you just crack all your adhesions. You feel those stretches going on. You pop those leg weights off, and you're good to go right off the bat. So, you know, give it a shot, give it a chance. I used to use 3-pound leg weights. Now I'm up to 5 pounds on each foot, and that's cool. I'm good with that.
I wanted to ask, when did you first start doing that? Did you hear about that from another drummer, or did you just think of it yourself?
No, that was totally from my own. It was from my own personal sports experience. Is back in 1988, I was going in to record my second record with Dark Angel, and you weren't even 2 years old at the time, probably.
Yeah, that's right.
You were just barely 2 years old. About a week before we entered the studio, I lost my legs. You know, I mean, there was a lot of double bass on that Leave Scars record, was what we were about to go record. And I just lost everything. I just couldn't, you know, I was struggling to play everything, and I'm like, what in the world is going on? So I thought, well, when I played baseball, if for those of you who are familiar with baseball,
you know, baseball.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. You're Canadians, you like baseball.
Yeah.
Well, when the on-deck batter is in the on-deck circle, which means you are the next guy to go up, usually you're there with an array of heavy bats, or what they call batter's donuts, which just slide onto your bat. You can take a 1-pound or a 2-pound sort of weight, swing it around a little bit, and you pop that donut off, and your bat is super light. So I just kind of applied the same sort of, I guess it's an isometric exercise or something, to my feet, bought some leg weights, warmed up with them, and popped them off for all these fast hauling Dark Angel songs that we were doing, and it worked. And I later realized when we were recording the record that I was probably just rehearsing them too fast. We weren't rehearsing to a click or recording to clicks back then.
Right.
I was probably just playing them too fast. You know, like, you can play so fast, it's still comfortable to you, but it's just right out of your little wheelhouse there. I think that was probably my issue, but at least in my head, these leg weights worked, and they've been a part of my regimen ever since. So, you know, I suggest giving it a shot. Most people I've turned on to the leg weights, they've gotten back to me, and I've told them, you know, hey man, in a week, your feet are going to be doing things that you just were not doing before. And sure enough, you know, the next time I see them, they'll be like, dude, those leg weights really worked. In a week, just like you said, I was doing things I could not do before, and I can do them all the time now. So it's like, hooray, leg weights. They do work, so.
Yeah. Do you think that your speed might slow down if you stop using them for a while? Think that might happen? Or?
Well, I do go for extended periods of time without using them. Like, for instance, on this last Testament tour, I started letting my warm-up routine get a little lax, and I don't think I was going on stage with them or if I'm popping off beforehand. That's a good question. I think I do go for a long time. It works for me, and I know it's also a mental exercise for all of this. And so, yes, your feet will get slower if you don't use leg weights. So use leg weights, damn it.
Try them out. Try them out.
Darn
yeah, I mean, Strapping a Lad was one of the fastest bands I had ever heard, and you played some pretty fantastic speeds with that band. So I don't doubt that you
Awesome.
you needed them for some of that stuff. You
Heck
know?
yeah, totally.
Actually, that kind of brings us to the next point: energy conservation. You've been on tours before where you're doing 2 1 to 1.5 hour sets a night. I mean, you did Testament and Anthrax. You did the Sounds of the Underground tour. You were playing with Strapping a Lad and Opeth.
Yeah.
You know, so not only is that a lot of music to just remember, but I mean, that's a lot of music to be playing at full capacity, full volume.
Sure.
Every single night. So, how do you stay, centered and balanced with your energy? How do you not tire out by the second set?
That's a real good question, and because that's one thing that I have through energy conservation, and I suppose I do have what is known as an economy of motion. I'm not very demonstrative, going big wavy arms, but I swear I will take the Pepsi challenge with anybody in terms of velocity. It might not look like, I might look really relaxed back here, but that doesn't mean I'm not like using some serious power back here. It's loud, so. That's one thing that I feel helps the energy conservation. If you're not being extraneous with extremities, you get to focus all your energy towards your outer limbs. I'm able to focus my energy into like my wrists and my fingers, and as well as my ankles and my toes. So that's where energy conservation really helps. It allows you to play with more power because you're not wasting power for the show. And I understand the show part of it. I definitely get that. I try to bring some of that in there too. However, I try not to do it at the expense of the parts. So that's one thing that I've always tried to concentrate on. So I can look like I'm being very calm and sedate, but I'm actually whacking the hell out of these things. So that's pretty good.
Absolutely. I remember hearing about this one time. Did you used to play or practice with a garbage bag wrapped around you?
I did.
You did?
Yeah.
For the purpose of?
Weight loss.
Okay.
That was strictly for, and we'd throw some vegetables into the soup.
Yeah.
We'd make a soup out of it afterwards.
Yeah.
No, it was just, hey, let me try to, I see, try to apply athletics towards this. This is a very aerobic thing that we do, especially the heavier, faster drummers out there, the more extreme of us. Trying to apply some of the athletic kinesiology, I suppose, towards things. It's all aerobic, it's all an exercise. So hey, I see guys that work out on the treadmill or whatever, and they got their little sweat suits on. So it's like, okay, well, just instead of wrapping myself in saran wrap every jam, I just cut a trash bag and poked holes in it and played with a trash bag.
It's funny, when I first started hearing about you before I first met you, I heard stuff like that, because you were like, oh, you should have seen him. It was at Vancouver at the Cobalt. He was playing a show, and then he just had a garbage bag on, and then he took it off and just sweat just poured out.
Oh yeah, God,
I'm like,
yeah,
this guy sounds like crazy. I thought you were you were nuts.
Oh man, and at that time I was I was a lot larger than I was now, so the bag fit really tight, and it was always a real challenge when you'd stand up and just flood, because it'll trap itself in there while you're all sitting down and all chunky. Yeah. But as soon as you stand up and straighten out, it just, oh God. Oh,
okay, we can move on from that one.
Thank you.
Actually, I had a question about, you talk about fingers and you talk about toes too, and people might not think about, people hear about using, your fingers for speed, for your hands, sure, that makes sense. We can see your fingers moving, but you don't you're wearing shoes. People don't normally see your toes moving, but
Sure.
I have personally been in a living room with you before when you had your shoes off, you were barefoot, and we were listening to music, and I was looking at your toes, and you were playing rudiments with your toes, like not even like for real, like just like how anyone would be playing a rudiment on the table. He was just air playing with his big toe, and
toeing.
I was kind of blown away because you were doing it with such like accuracy and everything.
That's
so
fun.
do you think about using your toes when you're playing live? You're like, okay, this is the part I got to use my toes because it's really fast.
You know, there are some times when, you know, it's like I've mentioned this in the last DVD, where sometimes you do kind of have to grip, you know, and you do find yourself, God, at the moment, I can't think of any certain passage in any of the songs where it's like, this is where I do this and this is where I do that.
Right.
But there are times when you're actually playing where you're like, boy, I'm using the outside of my toes right now. I'm using the little pinky toes and stuff. And this time I'm digging in and I'm using my big toe. And one thing that I do find helps with the toes is that it's like when I am lying on a couch working out a part, just got my eyes closed, I do my little finger tapping like this, or I'll be tapping on my chest or anything, and I'll be doing that. And I got the toes doing it. It's one of those things, if you can do it with your toes, you could do it with your feet.
Yeah.
You know, you figure if you could do something with your fingers, you could do them with your hands. So I think that's kind of why I started developing that. Like, hey man, if I can be really lazy, get a workout, not on the kit, on the couch, you got to do something to make it work out in your brain anyway. So, you know, you got your toes doing little rudiments or whatever.
Yeah.
Then it's one of those things that'll translate and transfer to your feet and your ankles pretty easily.
Gotcha. That's pretty cool. Let's move on to the rides. You got 2 rides. I know you're ambidextrous, but we'll save that for later. But right now, I just wanted to address that. Have you always played with 2 rides, or is that something you just came up with later on?
I suppose I started using 2 rides in the latter portion of Dark Angel's career, the last couple of years of that. And that really came about because in, I guess it was 1989, Dark Angel was opening for Overkill, and there was an opening band for both of us, and that band was called Wolvesbane, and that's the band that Blaze Bailey, who later went on to sing for Iron Maiden, he was with that band at the time, and their drummer Stevie Danger had a 4-piece kit, 1, 2, maybe it was a 5-piece, but it was a really tiny kit, and there were times when it's like if Overkill has their kit set up and the Dark Angel sets up in front, Stevie, who was a very cool guy, there would be no room for his kit. So there would be times when I'd be like, okay, let's just set up your kit for this so you could play it. I'll play your kit, your little 5-piece kit, little double bass pedal and all that. And I was kind of like, well, hey, let's not even move the ride, you know, because I had been a couple of years earlier before that, I had woken up one day on the bus where my left arm was completely dead, asleep for 2 weeks. I'd pinched some nerve. Oof. And so, I mean, I could barely do that, like with my hand. And so I had to, but I could play kind of a beat with it. And Dark Angel, very thrash, polka beat oriented band. I just started moving over here and playing stuff off the ride. And so that started working on the ambidexterity and stuff. You know, it's like, okay, well, if you could do it over here, you could do it over there. And it's, you know, it's not a bad thing to be, you know, I'm sure we'll get into ambidexterity at some point, but it's not a bad thing to have 2 rides. And also, I love 2 rides because there's so many times that I'll, you know, bang on a ride bell or just something just to keep a time or just as a little accent. And hey, you got 2 tones, you know? And one thing a secondary ride definitely came in handy with was in Death. And that's when I really started using the 2 rides. Yeah. Because since I am a left-hand lead, it's kind of hard to cross over and do like disco beats because I'd have to do like that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And Sean Reiner on songs off of Human, like Flattening of Emotions, there's a lot of, you know, where he's doing kind of a double hi-hat sort of thing. Right. And then he's moving over to the ride. I just couldn't, my hi-hat is so low, and at that time my gut was so big that crossing over was not easy to do. I learned how to do like kind of paradiddles to paradiddles, so I could come back with the right. I would do, most people would be playing the solid or whatever. I'd be playing the paradiddle to do it, just to be able to come over on the right. And this way, you could play that disco beat okay and not have to worry about crossing over, and it just comes in handy. It's great for double accents. And you could do a bunch of tasty stuff with 2 rides.
You mind showing us a couple of examples of you just ripping a double ride beat? Even something off of a record you played on, or if you just want to riff.
Yeah, man, let me try some. You got to do cool stuff when you got 2 rides. You don't have to go all the way over here. And a lot of guys, it's not fun to go all the way over here. If you get to go like that, then you get to open yourself up. And playing this way is a whole lot easier than playing that way or anything like that. So 2 rides are beautiful.
Yeah. I mean, you've used them to such a awesome degree in a lot of the bands you played in.
Cool.
Yeah, man, it's awesome. Tuning drums. What's your philosophy on tuning a drum?
That's a real good question, because I come from the era of huge sounding drums where even in pop songs in the 70s, they had massive sounding drums, and the drummers would play the drums. It wasn't like a looped beat like it is nowadays in pop songs. But I like the big, detuned, low, heavy, thunderous drums. And one thing that I do when I tune a drum, and perhaps we'll get into this a little later, I tend not to use a key very often. I'll just finger tighten. I'll start with the bottom head if I'm using a drum from just totally from top to bottom. I'll start with the bottom head, and I'll just you press down. I don't know if you can see any of this, but you just kind of you take your drum, set it on the floor, set it on a flat surface, something where you get some pressure on it, and you just press around. Finger tighten, you get everything kind of finger tight to start, and then you start working on it, and you press down while it'll build up a tiny little callus right here. Let me tell you, man, you're gonna feel it the first few times you try this. I have a callus from 30 years of doing this, but you just take your fingers and you grind on you tighten from the thread of the bolt here and of the lug, and you press down and do it, and you just get it all the way around, and everything just kind of turns out even. It always helps to have clean lugs, a little bit of WD-40 on the lug, and take your fingernail and squeeze that lug all the way through until it's just thread it until you've degunked it, and that makes this style of tuning really easy for you. And perhaps over the course of this weekend here at Drumeo, I'll be able to get a little bit more into that. But you get a beautifully tuned drum every time, and you're not messing around with keys and the little dials that do stuff for you. That's that's a very quick way to get things done. And this is you don't need a lot of. And one thing, I don't tune to any sort of notes or anything. I just make them low and heavy sounding. With Testament, however, we tune them up just slightly, because there's a lot of with the riff, and so Testament guys like that a little bit higher. So we accommodate Testament in that regard. But like with the Dethklok, we just go full heavy. Galaktikon, whatever, Dark Angel, really heavy, Death, super heavy.
Big old tub sound.
Yeah, man, I love that. I love thunderous sounding drums.
I haven't really heard of someone not using a drum key to tune a drum.
Figures. Well, most people don't wear leg weights and play with big bones either. So
you are a special case. I'll give you that. So you with Testament, you tune to like intervals, maybe, or is it like between you and Jeff? Like, do you pick notes, or do you try and make a something like that?
No, there's nothing like that. It's just pretty much just whatever I like it at. Let's tune it up a little higher than that. Yeah. A lot of the times, the sound guys appreciate that, because they're like, I can really get that attack through. And Testament has a little bit more attack, a little bit more on the top, but that could also, there are times when, I'm like, are you guys even paying attention anymore?
Right.
We're tuning them down, so that's cool. But I do notice, when you do tighten things up, you actually do obviously get a little quicker bounce back. And there are times when, especially when we're doing like one of those fly-in shows, fly-in festival show where you have never seen the kit until you're playing it on stage. And there's been times when it's like, oh, I see we didn't get to the tuning of this. We didn't tune it up because some of those are, takes a little bit more effort to get them to come out. So, that's where there is a little bit of obviously different velocities when you are different tightnesses create different feels in your own playing.
Yeah, I think sound men appreciate that too when there's actual like pitch differences and stuff. It makes it a little bit easier for them to dial things into.
And with that in mind, that's why when I'm using a 3-tom setup now, and that's why I put an inch between each tom. That's a 10, that's a 12, that's a 14, rather than going 10, 12, 13 or something like that.
Right.
Just for that reasoning right there. Sound man, love you for it.
That's awesome. Yeah. Wanted to talk about how freaking ambidextrous you really are. Yeah. Your kit is almost a mirror image. You're missing a second crash on that side and a hi-hat on that side, but you're doing everything open-handed. I've barely ever seen you cross over. I know you've done it, but you barely ever do it. That's pretty amazing to us regular drummers,
That's cool.
So, would you throw a baseball left-handed? Were you just always like that as a kid, and you just were always, it came naturally to you that way?
I think so. I mean, gosh, and I've always said this, but I think there's ambidexterity in everybody. I think everybody's ambidextrous, and it is. There are things that I noticed when I was a kid. Everybody else was eating right-handed, and I was eating left-handed, and I notice as I've gotten older, I shave left-handed, brush my teeth left-handed, and I'm sure a lot of people do little left-handed things. You're like, I wasn't even thinking about that, but that's ambidexterity. It was really when I had that injury back in 1991, where it's like, okay, well, you really cannot use this hand, so you better start getting good with this hand. And I just really, thrown into the fire of this tour is going to last another 2 or 3 weeks, and you got to do something, dude. We tried taping the drumstick into my hand, and the stick went flying the first song.
That's
so
rough.
I just, now I'd super glue it, but walk around with a stick after the show just all night. But it's ambidexterity, or at least applying what over here for right-handed drummers. If you apply all that to, you never know when you're going to have to get through a gig, get through a song or something, your arm's cramped up, and oh my God, for whatever reason, it's something that does come in handy. So if you do learn a lick over there, you should probably figure it out over here. It's just not a bad thing to have, and that's one thing. Like, one way I practice ambidexterity is when I air drum, and that's quite often. I air drum right-handed. That's a good practice of ambidexterity. I'll just try to do everything right-handed, and you're not making any sounds, but in your head you are. And so as long as what you're hearing in your head is matching up with what you're doing flipped over, then you're giving yourself a lesson right there in ambidexterity, and that's something that really is a good thing.
That's awesome. I've always noticed that players who are either open-handed or left-handed players always have some really cool ideas as well. I don't know if it's because they from the perspective they can write a part from the perspective of somebody who can do something starting on this side or do something starting on that side. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So people like you, people like Tom Hunting from Exodus, or something like that. Just guy like, I'm like, man, that guy's really good. I'm like, oh, he's a left-handed player. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, sure. Well, that's where I think, if you're a left-handed player, I think what you're doing is just applying everything a right-handed player would be playing, just backwards. And I've sat on Tom's kit before, and yes, it's odd having a hi-hat over here that got to open that thing, but that's one thing I've learned how to do. Like, if you're going to play, can I play right now?
Play, man.
Yeah, if you're going to play any, even a kick drum pattern. Right there, as you notice, I mean, playing everything together, that's a great way to develop, some ambidexterity for yourself. And there's been many a time during a gig where, the kick head will break, the pedal will fall apart, something will just go wrong over here. And while I've got Jeff down there fixing it like a madman, you got to switch over and play everything with your left foot. And, you have to do like double basics. Even that to get through even that to get through a part. So yeah, just if you could play it with your right foot, try it with your left foot, and it doesn't hurt. It's because there's going to be the time when you lose that kick drum for whatever reason, and you got to do everything with the left foot for the duration of a song or the duration of the set, which has happened like that before. And there's been times when the band has come back and said, I didn't even notice I didn't have a kick drum for the last entire 2 songs. They're like, we didn't know.
Man, it's funny. That would ruin most people's shows. That would cripple most people when they're on their set like that.
Sure.
But when you think about it, a lot of drumming is like working on your weaknesses. If you want to get better, if you're not too familiar with shuffles or swing or anything like that. Those are the things you need to work on if you want to become more well-rounded, and that makes good sense. Like if you're used to playing a show this way, like practicing a rudiment, leading with your right and leading with your left, why not practice your beats that way too, you'd only become a better player from that, and then also it might actually come in handy if something goes wrong too.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
and it's like if you've played as many shows as I have, which a lot of you probably have, a lot of you guys out there have played thousands of shows, you're going to have problems at some point. Yeah. Something's going to happen to where it's like, move it all over here and get through the song. Yeah. So, yeah, it totally comes in handy.
That's great. I wanted to touch on some of your favorite drummers and also talk about swing, shuffles, triplet feels.
Yeah, sure.
All that stuff. I've been told that your favorite drummer is Stevie Wonder. Is that true?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah?
Yeah, totally. To this day, fully. Just, I think it's because, and I've said this before, I think he is from Mars. So he definitely has a Martian approach to drumming, which he just does things that no other drummer was doing at the time. Just the way he would approach drums. I know that maybe he's not the most technically proficient, like, I don't know if you could do linear phrasing or 3s over 4s or anything like that, but his feel and his taste is so perfect for what I love. And believe it or not, like, you can equate some Lars Ulrich type things to Stevie, because Stevie will just drop some weird, off-time, weird stuff right in the middle of everything, kind of like Lars would do. However Lars creates that, I'm not sure. But Stevie's actually playing it. And, just that fill did not make any sense there. How was he able to come out, like, fills in, like, Living for the City, for instance. There's big old fill in that thing where you're just like, oh, God, this is nuts. But he comes right out of it. And that's just, I've always wondered, is that Stevie trying to get a drummer to play what he's hearing? And the drummer's like, man, I'm trying, but I don't think I'm getting what you're trying to say. And Stevie's just like, oh, give me those sticks. I'll do it myself. Yeah. That's the way I feel it happens with Stevie. So, but I come from an era before thrash metal, before extreme metal. So that's just, the guys I grew up on, like Tommy Aldridge and Cozy Powell, and I learned my early stuff from like guys like Peter Criss and
Dean
things like
Castronova.
that. Yeah, Dean came along a little bit later. I really discovered Dean in 1987, so I was, 19 at the time. And, I applied a lot of Dean immediately as soon as I heard that Wild Dogs Reign of Terror record. That's a landmark drumming album. And, he later went on to play with like Marty Friedman on the Dragon's Kiss record. And I've always admitted I stole the chorus lick for Symbolic from Death. I do it on a double ride. I think he did it on a single ride. And, that diddle-it, 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 with the double basses going on underneath it. That's right from Forbidden City from Marty Friedman. And a lot of the other stuff, the Vi records that Castronova was played on, just incredible drumming. He's such a great drummer. and really inspiring. And you know, he brought out a lot of the traditional metal stuff for me. Huge influence on the Symbolic record. And you know, but a lot of the guys that I grew up listening to, one thing I noticed is like Tommy Aldridge was known as this double bass drummer, but you never heard him going like a Judas Priest style of double bass or anything. He just played double bass super tasty and super funky, super groovy, always like super incredible pocket. I would strongly suggest drummers go out and check out Pat Travers' live album. It's called Live, Go For What You Know. Absolute landmark drumming album. So, you know, listening to metal drummers, rock drummers with taste, and, you know, I've gone back to, you know, like, God, Alex Van Halen, super tasty drummer, super amazing. Frank Beard, you know, God, I've stolen so many licks from Frank Beard. I've talked about that on the last DVD. Just anybody that had a little tasty little chop or anything, that influenced me, and that's why I think it's interesting, still to this day, like being a thrash metal drummer or extreme metal drummer or anything, and I'm still incorporating elements of classic rock and stuff like that, and that just, you know, brings another dynamic out to your playing, and that's not a bad thing.
That's awesome. So you were into a lot of Motown records and stuff too?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And you know, when I see you warming up and just jamming along, you're usually playing shuffles.
Yeah.
You know, which you might not expect from a guy who, you know, you might think is exclusively a thrash player, double bass, blast beat guy, but you're just rocking along on tons of different shuffles and triplet grooves and stuff. So I don't know, does that, what does that kind of do for your playing, you know?
You know what? One thing it does, I think it brings kind of a suppleness to your playing, you know, like adding some ghost notes in. That's a lot of shuffles have the ghost notes going on, and you can apply ghost notes to all the rock stuff. I got a lot of ghost notes from Frank Beard from ZZ Top. Totally, I didn't even know that, you know, his ghost note. I turned that into my ghost note. It's like that's my standard go-to ghost note for a rock beat, but playing a shuffle, playing a anything where, you know, you're getting a little bit of bounce on both hands, you know, it just brings a suppleness to your playing that allows for taste and some feel that a lot of thrash metal and extreme metal drumming does not call for, you know, for its regimentitis for all it is, really. You know, that's always fun when you can show that you have the chops. You can play all the stuff at the speeds and the tempos and all that sort of stuff that are necessary. But if you're able to just bring some flavor to it, that's one thing I find that shuffles help me with, is getting some flavor to your playing. And also, it's nice to show people that, yes, I am known for this kind of playing, extreme stuff, and I'm fine with that. But, you know, I have an arsenal of other things, and I think a lot of other drummers do. You know who's a great shuffle guy is Matt Byrne from Hatebreed.
Oh, yeah, man.
He's a shuffle master, man.
Absolutely.
I love listening to him play.
Yeah, he's a great drummer.
Yeah,
fantastic.
man, totally.
Very underrated.
Absolutely.
I had regimentitis one time, actually.
Okay.
Yeah. I think I need a shuffle groove, actually. Could you give me a shuffle groove?
I'd give one a shot, man.
Make me feel better?
Yeah, baby.
It's that cured it, by the way.
Oh, yeah, cool, man.
Thank you. That it's funny. I watched you play in the shuffle, and then you morphed into what I thought was a strapping a lad beat.
I think so, yeah.
I think it was, but
Yeah.
you know, I saw the connection all of a sudden. I'm like, oh, geez, that kind of is a bit of man. That's so cool. You know,
Excellent.
you might not think that those things connect, but there you go. It's right there.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that's also fun is doing some of the double stroke, I mean the ghost notey kind of things with a little bit of double kick going on underneath it. And a lot of times it gets lost. The top gets lost. And
Yeah.
for instance, in Love, I'm doing a bunch of ghost notes in that. And with many strapping songs, a lot of those ghost notes got lost in the mix because, you know, we got layer upon layer going on there, and I understand why that happens. But you know, if I can ever bring out ghost notes, you know, there you go. But there's a lot of times when I'm playing hauling double bass stuff and there's a ghost note going on underneath it, and I'm sure a lot of the shuffle approach has helped with that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I wanted to move on to taste, but we already touched on it a little bit when you were talking about you know, imitating other tasty players. But just, you know, in a nutshell, what does the word taste mean to you? Because I've heard you say it a bunch of times. Tasty drumming. What does that mean to you?
Well, I guess that is, I suppose, because I never really think about this question. That is just, I guess, when you have an arsenal of things where you can go for the super blasty thing, and hey, I'm definitely guilty of that a lot. But if you try to pull it back from that approach and, you know, drop in some splashes or kangs, as I have, or some ride bell stuff, you know, and it's also just an approach to where maybe you're not playing a mind-boggling fill, but you're playing something that's like, wow, that really stuck out. That was really cool and tasty. Like for instance, on your Madness Opus Drumeo thing that you did, there's so many tasty grooves on that where you're just dropping in tasty little splashes and things like that. And God, one of my favorite tasty licks, and it's so silly. I used to drive Steve DiGiorgio crazy with this because, like, when we were just getting together doing the original Death record that I did was Individual Thought Patterns, Stevie D and I were sitting there playing, you know, I like this, and he's playing me stuff he likes, and there's a song by Gino Vanelli called Wheels of Life that's on the Brother to Brother record. And awesome. You know, he was really excited that Anthony Jackson was playing bass on that. That was one of his guys. And in that song, Wheels of Life, there is a lick where the vocal is, wheels of life are turning round and round. Just that. I mean, it's just that. It's a flam on a floor tom, but that just, it gets me every single time.
Yeah,
the bass has got a nice little boom, you know, with it. Yeah. And he's like, why do you like that? All he's doing is that and that. And why? And I'm like, dude, it's just so tasty. And
makes you go like,
totally.
Like that.
You know, it just, it fits, it sits, it's awesome. So, you know, it hits. So, yay.
You know, you did some really tasty drumming on Devin Townsend's solo records in Infinity and Terria and stuff. Oh man, just it's very ethereal playing where it's like, I'm like, oh man, there's a whole other side to this guy. You know, you're just playing really open, and you can actually hear a lot of the tasty stuff that you're trying to do. You know, ghost notes and stuff. You're not playing a million notes a minute. You're just really, you're moving and grooving on that stuff. I love it.
Awesome,
it's great.
Thank you.
Feel and meter. I wanted to touch on that. Mm-hmm. So, you play to a click live with Testament, or
no?
No, you don't.
No.
Is okay. Is there any bands that you do play to a click? Like
there definitely have been. Like for instance, Dethklok. For those of you who are familiar with Dethklok, and those of you who have seen Dethklok or anything, you're aware of the big screen behind us that is synced up to what we're playing. We are sort of the orchestra for what's happening on the screen behind us. For instance, with Dethklok shows, we purposely keep the lighting rather minimal on us because we do want you watching that screen behind us. And I run the whole show with, you know, like the whole show lands on my shoulders. If I get off the click, then that thing starts getting off and people are like, whoa, what's happening?
It's a lot of pressure.
Yeah. And, I've mentioned this before. There have been times when the click has gone down, like we are starting the show and there is no click. But I remember that's the only time I could kind of get away with it, okay, because there is, we start the show with the death theme. For those of you who are familiar with it, you know the song. And so there's this and while on the screen, that was a flash behind me of just a spotlight or whatever, just a white screen, but the flash. And so when we start the set, and it's like, oh God, there's no click, and I know it's starting, I know we're okay, there's no click. I would line up, I can't see the screen, but I could see the flash, and so that would be my kind of visual, meter to, lock in with that. Find anything to help yourself lock into. Because a lot of times the muscle memory, the mental memory, I'm like any drummer. Sometimes I want to speed up and like lean into things. And it's like with a Dethklok or some of the other bands like Fear Factory or whatever, songs that are played to track, to click, you got to be spot on with those. So that's what helps. And one thing Devin pointed out, and I've mentioned this before, that I used to, and really Dethklok, I think, cured me of this, was I used to play a 30-second note behind the click. And Devin really enjoyed that. He was like, God, because you can really sink into whatever the riff is. You could really like lean into it and lean back on it, and that gives it some breadth. So don't change anything. So I'm like, okay, well, that's good. I never really noticed that, but that's what I would do. But, Devin's a smart man, and he's the one that pointed it out. So I'm like, okay, well, I understand that. And when it came to Dethklok, recording Dethklok albums, those have to be like super tight. So that's where I just taught myself all these tricks to be able to work with a click. Because before I ever worked with a click, Strapping was the first band I worked with a click for. And I had heard that, a click could turn drummers into crying babies, right. Just puddles in the corner. And I'm like, wow, I don't want that to happen to me. And fortunately, I took to the click pretty well. And I started using the click when you're not on the drums. Like, everybody probably knows this, your turn signal. That's a great click track, especially the turn signals that do the shuffle. Those are awesome. I love those turn signals. And, dripping water, there's another one, like the tick of a clock, obviously. Anywhere you can find a meter happening, whether it's your fan blade turning and it does a little click on, every millionth revolution or whatever. Yeah. Just try to pull anything in to just always work on your feel for the click.
That's great. I know the answer to this, but I wanted to ask you, do you think playing to a click makes you stiff or makes you sound stiff? That's, I guess, one of the challenges of the click, and perhaps that's why I would play a 30-second note behind, because I didn't want it to sound stiff with the click. And I do find that it was really dependent upon the project, dependent on the individual song, to where it's like, no, this does need to be like just butted right up on the click. Just do not waver from it. And there are times when you get to just kind of sit back. And that's kind of what my internal feeling is with the click, is I tend to sit back. I do have to kind of make myself, step up to the click, because I do want to just rest just behind it. It just feels good. But sometimes the project does not call for that. So you just want to be able to move with whichever way the project or the song goes. But clicks are fun. I mean, for me, you get to turn your brain off. You don't have to think that much. You play to the click and you're good to go. Right. Awesome. That brings us to our last tip with Mr. Gene Hoglan. You touched on this a little bit just a second ago, mental exercises. So that could be anything from like playing along to your turn signal like you were talking about. I heard you mention one time that you would wait for a clock to go to 60 or, and then you'd close your eyes and you'd count the seconds in your head and you'd open up your eyes when you thought it was bang on the one again.
Yes. And that's a really fun trick to try. That's a mental exercise that you could spend 10 minutes on, or an hour on, or 2 minutes on. You can always do that. And it's one thing to, like, I do this in the hotel room when I got nothing else to do. Sit there and look at the clock and watch it, and do what you just explained. And it's just a good little mental exercise. It can't be a bad thing. And the one thing is that you don't want to cheat. You can go, like say if you find yourself, I think I'm falling way behind. So you start counting a little faster just to make it end on that 0. Don't do that. Just take yourself, just put yourself in the wrong. It's okay to be too fast or too slow. Like last night, for instance, I tried this last night in the hotel. I was sitting there, this worked. And the first time I tried it, I was 10 seconds over. Because I haven't tried this exercise in quite some time. And the next round through, I was 4 seconds behind. And when I was 4 seconds behind, I was like, I think I'm falling behind. Do I speed myself up just so I land on that 0? I didn't. And then the next couple of rounds through, the next minute, it was like, okay, well, I'm opened my eyes. There it was. Okay, still a little, slow, or I'm still a little fast. And then, the fourth time through, it was like, okay, it's spot on. So that's good. But yeah, don't be afraid to mess up. That's okay, because this is an exercise, and exercises are for building strength, building mental strength. So don't be afraid to, get it wrong for 2 hours at a time, if you're getting it wrong. But this is all working on just your internal clock, and that's never a bad thing.
That is awesome. And that's why you got the nickname, you've earned the nickname, the Atomic Clock.
Excellent.
That brings us to the end of 10 heavy metal drumming tips with Gene Hoglan. Gene, I really appreciate you coming out and helping us out. I'd love to see you play another song.
Sure.
Yeah. What you got for us?
Well, let me see. We were going to play.
Well, I tell you what. Let's wrap this whole thing up, and we'll get you to play us out with one other song. How about a Galaktikon song?
Sounds good.
That'd be great. Again, can't thank you enough for not only coming out here, but man, just being one of the best examples of good, well-rounded heavy metal drumming. You've done a lot for everybody who plays in the genre. You changed my life when I was a teenager, when I first heard your music, and then I was fortunate enough to get to meet you and get to know you. And I can't thank you enough for setting me off down that path, and I know a lot of us out there feel the exact same way. So I mean,
that's very cool.
We couldn't be happier that you're here, man. And
man,
again, on behalf of everybody in the heavy metal community, thanks for all that you do, and I'm so stoked that you just keep doing it.
Oh man, that's awesome, Ash. Well, I appreciate it, man, and that's very cool. I appreciate that. That's
right on.
Awesome.
Well, we love you, man. Thanks again for coming to Drumeo. I'm gonna split, and this is a Galaktikon song. Enjoy, everybody.
Yeah, man.